So there are two things. Firstly, the strategy of what the environment's got to be to make sure that people are coming back to work, and also to keep them at work. And from Gav's point of view, how many people will be coming back into the offices? Is it open plan? Is it more touchdown space? Do they need less space? And I'm thinking that's probably the way to go. And then secondly, at the moment, do you want to be the first one to implement something?
Hi guys, we're back with a fourth instalment of our Knowledge Share series, here to discuss return to office, the post-COVID world of work, and how our industry partners have been helping their clients over the past couple of months. For this session today, we're joined by Gavin Power, Director of NOVO, Building Services and M&E Experts. We've got John Park, Partner at Appleyard and Trew and PM and QS Specialist. We have Alan Kitching, owner of AK Developments and CESBI Developments Commercial Landlord. And of course, myself, Mark Kitching, and our company founder, Victoria Stairs, representing Vic Limited. So I guess a slightly more technical conversation to be had today compared to our last discussion around furniture, but still just as impactful on our topics of return to work and the future workplace. Within our previous sessions, we found the best place to start is by asking, how have you all been operating over lockdown? How have you found your successes and challenges? And how have you been supporting your clients or tenants over the past couple of months, especially around COVID and the workplace? So I guess, who would like to take the floor first?
Maybe I can touch off. After you, John, sorry.
I think from our point of view, Mark, it's been fascinating how quickly COVID came into play and how we managed to get everybody working at home, how quickly people were connected, how comfortable they were with working at home and the connectivity. You know, over 4 sites, we got people up and working at home within a week. So I think we adapt very quickly as an industry, and as people, we adapt very much for that.
The years of us consultants telling people that it was possible and it's beneficial, and everyone been digging their heels in for a long period of time, and then when it becomes enforced and everybody has to, it becomes a quick snap change and everybody just puts their head down and does the best to succeed and carry on.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
John,
yeah, I think we've had similar experiences. Obviously, from our perspective, it was kind of a double impact really, because we were given notice in our offices prior to COVID kicking in. So our notice period ended on the 5th of June. So in the middle of March, we sent all the staff home to work, of which we managed to deploy all the IT. And we actually implemented a cloud-based IT system because we were traditional server-based in the office. And obviously going to a cloud-based system has also given us the facility and flexibility to fully work, you know, from remote. So our unique position is a bit different in terms of 5th of June, we thought we were going to be able to get more of an extension on the office, but the landlord couldn't get an extension on their offices in Leeds. So everything went into storage on the 5th of June, and we've been totally remote and currently without office space from then. So I'm in the process at the moment of looking at other office spaces, which is interesting, because we've done a survey internally, which I can touch on as well in terms of the feedback from that.
You do want office space then, Gav? You're not looking for a full remote, flexible approach?
Yeah, well, I think initially, everyone's worked well from home. You know, we've obviously invested in the technology side of things, you know, from a digital perspective. So that's working really, really well. But I think the reality is, and it came out in the survey we did, I think it's important to have a base. You know, I think just from that work-life balance, it's important to be able to break away, you know, whether that is a few days a week into the office or a couple of days. The survey we carried out, which I were interested into, it was interesting into the results. I've got the percentages here. There's 17 staff, just for an example, but 60% of the staff have come back saying they prefer to work from home sometimes on an occasional basis. So that just gave you a feel as to, they like working from home, yeah, and they've enjoyed that, but it's important, I think, to have that base.
And it's quite different, isn't it, in Yorkshire, where we're all living from, but myself being in London, the general practice in London is that many companies and their employment and their staff do work from home, and they do have flexible ways of working. Whereas I know, speaking from many regional companies, that it's just not the norm, and it's sort of, there's still that norm, that sort of mental barrier to break in terms of flexibility. So that's quite interesting that you're starting to look for probably a smaller office space that just allows a hub. Correct. To pull back.
Adds that lead. We know for a fact, in terms of efficiency, we're not going to require the same size of space we had. And with it being more flexible, agile working, then I don't know, it can reduce in size and scale, really. So, and then we've also done.
If you need any space modelling, you know who to come to. We can help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, I was pretty surprised, to be fair. I think I've had a chat with Alan previously about where we'd go from an office location, and we thought the preference was on the outskirts of Leeds, but the survey responses have come back saying 75% would prefer city centre location versus outskirts. So that's really changed what I actually thought the staff preferred.
Just because of transport links?
Probably.
I can only assume that, yeah, in terms of the commute side. But then the negative side of it's always been, well, the parking restrictions and everything else with the city centre. But it's interesting to know that. I mean, I'd happily work in the city centre, but I didn't think we'd get that type of response. I thought it would have been outskirts still. So maybe we're going to have to change our dynamic in terms of office location.
It's been quite interesting about the return to work as well, sort of, because we've got the 4 offices, and London's definitely been treated differently to the other offices. We're tending to find a migration back into the workplace and all the steps that we've needed to do for that. But London as a location, we're just not looking to put people back into the offices yet.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of transport sort of.
It is definitely mainly the
like,
transport issue. Yeah.
Like I keep saying to Mark on our calls, like London is that. Like it's definitely increasing. We're definitely seeing like a higher percentage over the last couple of weeks, but we don't drive our cars in London because it's easier to get on the train, and obviously the trains are quite limited and restrictive. So yeah, but you have taken that approach because it's completely in line with everything else we're hearing.
Yeah, I think from the landlord perspective, it's been dead interesting. Like our office is fully rented, right? And I know on Hornbeam Park, I know it's a regional out of city centre offices. There, it must be about 95% full. Right. But from the start of COVID to the end of COVID, the occupancy of our office is maybe only about 15% now. Now, we've done the normal office things as sort of the COVID measures and the 2 meters, the sanitisers, etc. And now we're talking to the owners of the businesses. Now, we've 22 different businesses in there, right? The largest business employs 80 or 90 on 10,000 square feet nearly, and the rest are distributed in smaller units. But the business owners are saying they want their people back to work now. And the reluctance isn't from the owners, it's from the people that have been furloughed or working at home and they've never done before. And it's not that they don't want to come back, they're scared to come back. So the landlord's got to think about getting the incentives of getting the people back in and making, to me, got to think a bit more smarter to get them back in and ease their mental tension they've got of returning to work by saying, look, we've looked at our offices and we're making them COVID proof. Or even going further, and let's not talk about COVID, let's make our offices pandemic proof, whether it's COVID or some future, whatever disease it is, COVID 23, 24, 25. And that's what I'm getting my head round at the moment. Now, my office is pretty simple. If we go on COVID measures, because we're out of town, we can open windows. Medical science is saying initiation is that fresh air, COVID doesn't transmit as much as internally. We can open windows. It's great for us, right? Yeah. But I can understand city offices, you can't open windows because of noise and pollution. So they've got to think smarter. And think about how they can adjust the services to encourage people back, and get a COVID-free badge, get a tick on their building. You know what I mean? Like a BRIAM or a pandemic-free tick.
Yeah,
That's interesting. Up and set myself at a company and give them the authorization and everything like that.
I think there's an American standard, is it a WELL accreditation?
Yeah.
That seems to be, that seems to be, I guess that future-proofing, we're going to be taking a lot of the basics out of that and working up our own standard going forward.
That might be a good idea, John, Gav. You know, I'm a member of ASHRAE. You've got access to ASHRAE guides, right? It's just to look at what their WELL standard is and start calling it the WELL standard over here and start pushing it.
Well, that's it, I think.
The WELL standard will include spatial arrangements as well as service arrangements and all that sort of stuff.
Like I say, over and above health and safety and well-being, like you say, I think people are going to be, like you say, selecting buildings in terms of a scoring system or equivalent, and obviously from a building design perspective, I think ultimately, you know, you've got a few issues, haven't you? You've got a congregation of people with occupancy in there, you know, so BCO, British Council of Offices, in terms of occupation density, you know, probably is going to have a change from your typical 1 per 10, you know, increasing maybe, you know, and the fact that, you know, the amount of airborne transmission and contact transmission within buildings now, just from a services point of view and technology perspective, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of changes in terms of building design, you know, and how they'll operate.
In fact, I'm rebranding the innovation centre as the innovation hub after what you said there, Gav.
Yes.
Companies are going to downsize and people want to work away from the offices. The big floor plates are going to go. Well, landlords will be partitioning these off pretty quickly, right?
What's just happened, Alan, which is weird about partition. That's a brilliant one. This survey we've just done internally, we asked them about would they prefer open plan or cellular.
Yeah.
So typically where we were before was a listed type heritage building, and we were split up into teams in the areas. So whether that's had an influence, but we asked the question, what would they prefer in terms of space now, whether this is COVID related or whether this is just what they've been comfortable working within. 90% of them would prefer not to work in open plan office space.
That's so interesting.
Plan.
Yeah, they don't want open plan office now. Whether this is because everyone's been working from home and have been more insular within their own comfort bubbles, maybe building design is going to go back to more of a cellular way of shape and form, and maybe businesses have gotten to implement their own working bubbles within the cellular offices.
So we've actually approached it in a different way, and in the sense of if you have, and this is just our take, so you know, there's no one really knows yet because we haven't been through this, so this is just our take in the sense of if you have an open plan environment, you can see people coming towards you, so that helps at the moment with social distancing. So when you're in your own cellular space or your own pod, it's very difficult to manage who's coming in or out because you can't see what's going on around you. So we've been sort of advocating a little bit more actually around the open plan environment because you can have visibility across the floor plates. There may be some advantages onto the mechanical and electrical side, which I'd love to explore with yourselves and sort of what could be changing there. But also we've got a client at the moment that we're working with and looking at their office reconfiguration for the future for when they return. And we were talking about business continuity and the sense of we've always planned for security breaches or terrorism or burglaries or something where business continuity planning comes into force. But there are very few companies who've actually planned for a pandemic. So at this point, pandemic-proof buildings, we don't have them. So we're actually looking at ways of keeping an open plan office, but including secondary circulation. So actually making sure you've got two ways of being able to walk around an office or thinking about how to navigate around in a little bit more of a smarter way. So that's nothing to do with security. It's nothing to do with open plan or cellular, really. It's actually to do with creating something that allows you to potentially have to social distance in the future, or what circulation routes have to be a certain way. So I'd be quite interested to look at, maybe Mark, it's something we need to ask our clients in terms of their feeling of open plan and not. I know that that particular client I'm talking about, has done a survey around people wanting to return to work. They only want to come back to 2 to 3 days a week, but only to meet people, to collaborate. That's the only reason they want to come back to the office. So the office has got to become that really attractive pull to make the commute, to meet people. And actually, if you're meeting people in this environment, the last thing I want to do is sit in a meeting room with 4 other people. I'd rather sit in a wide open space and have that conversation. So as I say, that's just how we're coming at it.
Yeah, it's interesting, yeah.
I agree there, Vic. The Situ guys got on in expanding that circulation in the space.
Yeah.
They were saying something, it might be this, but they're saying we'll have a perimeter corridor right round the outside of the space. You have circular way round. But a landlord doesn't want any.
Doesn't want that. No.
I don't want any circulation space because
precious for it.
Saying, here's the office, 10,000 square, but you've got 5,000, corridors and traffic. I'm not paying that. Whereas I'd rather still keep the open plan, but contain it within an environment, within the space provided by the services, if we can.
Yeah, I just think on the building design elements and what other things we were talking about, like contact mitigation measures, from a servicing point of view and overall design perspective. I mean, it goes on and on, doesn't it? I mean, you may end up with less doors in offices, there may be more automated doors in offices. Contact mitigation being facial recognition, proximity card readers and digi keypads are just going to go out of the door, aren't they? Lifts, there's going to be no call buttons on lifts anymore. It goes on and on and on. And then I think mainly in terms of contact mitigation, you can mitigate contact, but then in terms of surfaces and materials, antimicrobial materials, a lot in the use about types of materials, obviously copper being a great one, but not everyone's going to put copper inside the buildings. But there's a lot of other, materials where I think changes of specifications are going to fully change in offices and generally just buildings throughout.
That's great. Great point.
I never thought they're fantastic, and from my point of view, with my M&E head on, I love that. But from my landlord's head, it really scared me, that one, Gav, because it's all cost again. But it's a step change. It's a step change again.
But then, Alan, the sort of investment, I guess, if you take the point that you raised earlier about maybe all of those things become that checklist of what makes an office more attractive.
Yes.
Investing up front into all of those things that are making people feel comfortable, your areas become more attractive than your competitor down the road. Because
I agree entirely, Victoria. And the step change, it might be expensive at first, but once it's the norm, competition comes in and the prices will come down from the manufacturers and all that sort of stuff. So, it's a very valid point. And, I never thought about that one. But I'm just trying to think of which language I'll be talking in the lift to get it to operate if the call button isn't.
You have to have regional dialects that recognise Yorkshire.
Take us up to top, lad.
From the landlord's point of view, I guess it's a competitive differentiator. You don't want to be the landlord that's going to do it last, because
exactly. I'd definitely want to be on the ball there. Yeah, definitely.
I think what Gavin said about his sort of mini survey of people returning to work, that's going to be driven. So people are driving what they want to do to get back to work, to feel safe. And then that's got to be fed through to the client base, and then the clients have then got to feed that back to landlords. So almost landlords have got to get ahead of the game.
Exactly,
seeing what the requests are going to be, aren't they? I think we're talking about people working in groups and working on rotas, so that if there is an outbreak, then there's only one group that's hit by it, and the other group is like the contingency proposal almost, in a way. So that again needs a lot less space. Those things about surfaces that Gav was talking about, it's going to hit on the furniture, isn't it? A soft furnish is more acceptable going forward. They're going to be less acceptable. I think it's more cleaning regimes and things like that.
But that's what's so ridiculous about these screens that people are suggesting in offices, because they're acrylic and hard surface, and they are like absolutely. If someone sneezes, it's incredible that those things are being placed in offices. From my opinion, I think if you stood there and sat there in a visor and a face covering and a an apron and a screen, fine. But you're not like that in an office. You know,
I just got a knee-jerk reaction on some of the things that are happening within the industry that I've read about. Now, manufacturers are talking about, there's a manufacturer on the market now, he's putting air purifiers in the space. Now, I don't know, right, the medical terms, if they work or they're not, but the high efficiency recirculators within the space, right, that have got HEPA operating theatre filtration on, that takes the space air and filters it again after the space air has been just, whether that's good or not, it might be definitely good. But the thing that really attracted me as a landlord was that hitting the side of it was, it might be good mentally for the occupants to see this, and it might very well work on that. But what it did do, taking that secondary filtration in the space, it minimised the deep clean of the space. For me as a landlord, a deep clean spaces regularly in offices, right? If I put them in, right, which are simple portable things, and it stopped me a deep clean, and it does help COVID, or even if it didn't help COVID, I think that's quite attractive to me, because it's got payback.
That's really,
So they're knee-jerk reactions at the moment that people are coming into space, but I don't think in the step change that's the permanent thing. That might be one just to give reassurance to staff to come in.
No one knows what the end game is going to be. It's all of these things that are like people are experimenting with, and you know, we're finding, Mark, aren't we, that in our industry we've got loads of people coming up like out of nowhere suggesting they can do workplace strategy and are saying people need to do this. Well, no one knows what you need to do. People are experimenting with things, and we have one of our clients that's saying, you know, they don't want to do the knee-jerk thing and spend all of the money going forward and doing changes when actually in 6 months' time something else could be coming out. And that's the right approach. People shouldn't be reactive, but the stuff that you're sharing today and all the insight and all of the different factors of consideration is so important to how people are going to build their strategy going forward. And even just considerations, you know, I hadn't thought about minimising a deep clean, Alan. You know, for a landlord, that must be amazing, particularly on a
definitely.
So all of these things that you're sharing are just completely valid, because we don't know what's going to happen.
It's not the deep clean that I'm bothered about, because the cost of the deep clean is always put on the service charge. But I want to bring the service charge down and hold the service charges, because it's no good me thinking I can, oh, we'll give them anything. If they want it, let's give them it, and we can put the service charge up. Because the tenants are going to get smarter, and I'd rather bring the service charges down and keep the rent the same. Or the analogy is, if I could half the service charges, I could put what I'm saving on the service charge on the rent and still make it cheaper to them.
Yeah,
you know, it's all a thing.
And I think that.
Where do you stand on the communal areas, Alan? As in toilets being more individual, gender-neutral toilets, tea points being within the workspaces rather than more of a communal kitchen needing more cleaning, so that tenants become more in control of their own destinies in a way, in their own cleaning regimes and strategies.
I think that's good. I think that is really good, and I'd accommodate that as a landlord, because I know that's the way it's going. And if that was the way it was going, I'd be doing it straight away and getting me pandemic tick right. Yeah.
But then you'd automate that, wouldn't you? You know, like you talk about.
Well, you get Japanese toilets where it flushes and put the toilet with
sanitary accommodation now. Things like contact again. Everything's going to go infrared, isn't it? Infrared taps, infrared systems. You stand up. It sanitizes your seat on the infrared. Yeah. You're getting rid of that.
That's definitely the way to go. But at that moment in time, I don't think a lot of landlords have gone down that way.
But the few.
In a new build, that would have to become up as an option.
We're just talking with a developer at the moment on some student accommodation in London, and they're coming to the end of the project now, but quite a while ago they instigated that they would put the Japanese style toilets in, which are fully operational, fully enclosed.
Definitely
So yeah, why not?
Well, that's the thing as well, like in Japan or China or, that sort of areas, they've been dealing with pandemics. They walk around in masks all the time, and, from the pollution side, and they have a greater understanding of what viruses, well, I don't think that's a fair thing to say. Do they have a greater understanding? No, but do they live by a different way of their everyday life? Yes. So they do have these Japanese toilets, because they've had to sort of adapt and look forward and do something to mitigate transfer. And again, to Gavin's point, the contact mitigation piece, they're already there because they've had like different things to deal with. We're trying to catch up, and unfortunately, I've got one client who built their wonderful headquarters office last year, and a lot of what they have done is really smart. It's fabulous. They've got infrared taps and towel dispensers. They've got swipe card access, and they've also got fingerprint access. So everything they were already thinking about when they were building that building. So they're already easily or more able to adapt into this type of environment. It's the tenants, unfortunately, that have been probably a little bit too far moving in, maybe, I don't know, so 10 years ago even, that are going to have to make a lot of investment with this type of technology. But it is really interesting.
It's the investment bit I want to touch on, really. There's a real balancing act or chess game here, because pandemic could have hit financial performance of businesses. A lot of businesses will have been affected in the amount of work they were managing to get through. A lot of their clients may have shut down or had projects pulled from beneath them. So if you're doing a balance act with your financial performance, but then you're aware you've got all these investments to make your office and staff safe and feel able to come back. But then we've been talking about the cost savings from the services side. So there's you're almost like, you look at it as in, this is a big investment to make, but you can offset some of that investment with the savings in the services. So from what seems that from day one looks like a massive mountain of this is going to be spend and re-strategize, and there's actually, you can get your small wins from your adjustment to your services and from these tweaks that will make that impact softer. And I think that's really, really important for people to be aware of, that it's not just a one-way street of spend, that this can be offset and this can be made more manageable.
The savings can, very good point. If you can make the savings and the significant on services, that can finance the loan to implement the others, so it's not affecting your services and all that sort of stuff, if you want to go down that way. But people will, you've got 10 years leases, so if you save 5-10 grand on your services, that finances quite a big loan over 5 years, and all that sort of stuff, or whatever, or 100 grand you can save on bigger offices, 200 grand in London. It's a lot of money.
John, are your conversations, I know he's popped off the screen, hopefully you can still hear me.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was going to say...
You're expired, John.
It's had enough, he's gone. I'm actually really interested in what you said about the developer and student loan accommodation. Is there any conversations that you've had during pandemic time, so sort of maybe from January now, with developers or other people looking that have re-strategized or have put projects on hold and are now going back, and that they are taking a financial hit? How's that working in your way?
Yeah, there's definitely some hesitancy. Literally day before yesterday, we had a project put on hold, and so there are two things. Firstly, the strategy of what the environment's got to be to make sure that people are coming back to work, and also to keep them at work. And from Gav's point of view, how many people will be coming back into the offices? Is it open plan? Is it more touchdown space? Do they need less space? And I'm thinking that's probably the way to go. And then secondly, at the moment, do you want to be the first one to implement something and then it's the wrong thing? We're just not through the pandemic in any way, but is it going to get worse or better? And are you going to strategize it first? Are you going to take those decisions and implement it, or are you going to wait and see what works for others, really?
And what are the impacts that are having to those projects on hold? Like, we all know there's going to be, costs on delay or whatever. What is that particular client from the experiencing?
It's going to go right up the tree, isn't it? So if it depends at what stage you're at, but if you've actually bought a building and you're going to refurb it, you sat on an asset that you're paying rent on, and you don't really know what to do with it, or you've got to keep it pretty flexible to be let in 6 months' time. A couple of the projects have been redesigned at the moment. Some people are just saying, well, I've got the building, I'm paying rent, I'm going to be paying rates in so many months. I've got to do something with it. So I've got to implement some sort of design strategy. And they're just taking the best of what the market's is advising them at the moment. The things that are on board at the moment that are actually coming to a head and coming to handover, there's not a great deal that's being implemented to leave the spaces flexible to the client, and then they're feeding back as to what their demands might be now for different use of spaces. So
they're quite receptive to letting that be flexible and then adapting it.
Yeah.
That's quite good. That's good.
They've got to be, haven't they? Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that we've touched on that nobody wants to be left behind and to be the last person to do this, especially from an employer or a landlord point of view. But there's a reluctance to be the first as well. So is that there's some kind of impasse where everybody's kind of just sitting around waiting for the first brave people that aren't going to take the
it's a little bit like sustainability, wasn't it? You know, everybody wanted to implement sustainability, but what had the best from an owner's, developer's point of view, what had the best feedback? Did they want to be the first in there? Not particularly. Let's see what everybody else is doing. And then it just picks up a pace, and it'll be the same incremental approach, I think.
Yeah.
But it's obviously going to be a learning curve, isn't it? You know, people are going to make moves, make mistakes, learn from them. It's just going to evolve. I mean, there's no hard and fast, is there? You know, it's unprecedented, but people have got to make decisions and innovate, haven't they? So whoever takes the mark the quickest and goes with it, your top end developers are going to probably lead the way, aren't they, and start coming up with innovative ways, and the rest will follow.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions that haven't even come around yet. People who are working at home, we've had a great summer in lockdown. We've had nice sunny weather. Everybody's got a tan. The gardens look brilliant. But come autumn, winter, when we're all sat at home in the dark, in the cold, and and we all put our heating on, or put our electrics on, some people are going to start asking questions as to, well, who's paying for this? I'm working, but I'm also paying for my home environment. So going back to the landlord, or going back to the clients and employers, saying it's costing me a fortune to be at home all this time. The employers are they going to start contributing to bills? Are then employers going to go back to the landlords and say, well, it's costing me a fortune now because I've got people at home, and I'm still being billed for the same amount of energy at work as well. So
there's a small tax benefit. There's a small tax benefit we've just advised all the staff for. But you know, it ultimately does that cover the reality of the costs from being at home.
That tax benefit's different, isn't it? Because we've been looking at that, and the tax benefit of like the room that you're working for. Whatever.
Yeah, we're home working.
Yeah, but it's interesting you raised that, John, because we had a client that was, in fact, Mark and I have just been vetting their approach, and you know they was sort of talking around sort of allowing, it's like building in their policies to move forward, that if people want to work from home, they can buy a monitor screen and they can charge it back to the company. So we're then saying, well, does that asset belong to the business? So you've bought something for home, the client, the employer has paid for it, so technically that's their asset. Then you've got to standardize what they buy, because it's your asset. And the same respect of, if somebody says they've been working 9 hours a day, how do you prove it? How do you prove that to the employer that they should pay that rate, and you know that electricity wasn't your dishwasher running all day? Or, you know, it's really difficult. It's a really interesting sort of breakdown, and maybe energy providers are looking at how they can best support, you know, people working from home, because, you know, we can't prove that. And the conversations we're having with our client around that at the time, you know, they were completely aligned in, how are we going to do this? Because it's so difficult. It's so difficult to prove. Phone lines as well. You know, everyone has a mobile these days, which pretty much is a contract.
Internet connection.
Yeah, internet connection as well. So really interesting. It might just have to be a baseline cost that people have to think about.
Is there a compromise, though, isn't there? You know, there's got to be some form of compromise. You know, having more flexibility working from home, I suppose it's in your advantage to have the best broadband connection you can have, you know, to have the best office mini setup you can have. So I suppose ultimately, otherwise, well, let's come back into the office then, isn't it? It's that compromise, I think, with people.
And it's so difficult now, Gav, because if this had been 1 month, we do change management within VIX, and if it had been 1 month, people would have been off enough of a time to say, yeah, that was all right, I enjoyed working from home, here's what I learned, but I'm ready to come back. The issue has been so long that this is now everybody's new normal. So to make, for me, my commute to work from Wimbledon to the City of London is about 50 minutes. Well, in 50 minutes, I can be down here straight away in the morning, working as soon as I start. And on my commute, I haven't got that same access. So we're now weighing up, well, how much do I need to go in the office? And the only reason I'll go into the client offices is because I need to see a particular person. And actually, it's better to have that conversation. So actually for me as well, and because of the way that we work with our clients, we can be flexible. And I haven't had a desk for the past, I don't even know, 6 years probably, because being consultant, we don't work that way. But I think a lot of people are using it for some really interesting conversations, as to say, I can't come back to the office now because it's summer holidays and my kids are off school. And then we've had a challenge back to say, well, kids are always going to be off during the summer holidays, but it's the summer holiday camps that aren't open to support those kids. Those things. So you get so much. People's mindset now is, well, I've had to work from home. I've proven I can, so I'm going to continue with it. And actually, from an employer's perspective, and we're all employers pretty much on this call, it's really hard because you want to see your team, because you want to help develop them, you want to help bounce ideas off, and Zooms are exhausting, right? This is a really exhausting time to be digitally on all the time. And I miss seeing Mark and Robin and Erica. Well, Erica's in Madrid, so I haven't seen her that often. But to actually have that FaceTime is so important. People are using it to their advantage to sort of stay and get their Amazon parcels, do their washing.
I think it is exhausting, because I think I've personally found, I think everyone may be the same, it's becoming much easier. Instead of you ping an email or a quick call, shall we have a quick Teams call?
Quick Zoom,
so you tend to find you don't have a quick Zoom. That quick Zoom ends up being half an hour. Then you have another one.
It's your management time though, Gav. I know they're all working at home, you're digitally involved with them, and you'll be at the forefront. So I know from your point of view, I know exactly, you'll know how many hours they're working, because I know the type of guy you are. But it's taken you, right, to focus on the running of the company rather than on the company to develop your business, isn't it? Definitely. All that. It's your time which spent maybe better. Well, at the moment, monitoring your staff to make sure the efficiencies and answering the queries where you can't talk to them. But it's
difficult though with being a different environment to the office, though, isn't it? That you miss interaction, but you miss conversations, you miss what's happening on the jobs, you miss leadership qualities, perhaps.
What you said about the after being in retirement, right? I can tell you the worst months when you're retired are the winter months. Because you get depressed, honestly, because there's no golf, there's no holidays, there's nothing, you want to be away and stuff like that. I'm sure people working from home will feel like that. I don't know the benefits of my company when we were running the companies that I work for was getting brainstorming sessions together and all that sort of stuff. And they didn't, in conversation. I go in conversations to meet you, John, in the office. And I always come out there having to spend money after being you, but it's a little brainstorm, isn't it?
But you
don't get that over here, do you? You don't get it.
It's not often used with workplace, but I think the word best suiting it is osmosis, isn't it? It's the things that happen naturally that just you absorb information from catching conversation, from bumping into someone on your way to get a drink, from all those things that just don't happen when you just sat at home.
Invaluable.
Well, I remember John being, so vibrant, and we'd have conversations in the kitchen, and there may be opportunities that we, be bringing in tender opportunities or opportunities just
exactly.
And those types, particularly in the environment that you're in, and all those mini sort of businesses, it's just absolutely intrinsic to being able to continue your business being successful. And I think for us, we've really, being relatively new to the industry in terms of the business, we haven't been able to go to networking events. I'm better if I'm able to talk to people about what we do. People don't necessarily want to sit on a Zoom and hear about a business that, we know you're there, but I've got to sort, to Alan's point, I've got to sort my team out. I need to understand what my efficiencies are. Haven't really got time to now sit on another call and hear about a business where actually we're trying to work through our strategy. So it really doesn't help, like, not having that interaction from our perspective. And, you know, we're very fortunate to have been, you know, recommended and had word of mouth. So we're continuing with getting new projects that way. But, you know, thank God we've got that previous reputation, because otherwise we would be really struggling.
Yeah. But there is a whole community, there is a whole network that you depend on, and bumping into people, meeting people, getting recommendations. You do depend on that. One thing I was going to ask was, we've got a couple of projects that are maybe going into Cat A, and where do you think that the developers will be going on the Cat A? On central plant, will that be, are we going to look at more zone systems? Are we going to look at smaller plant but more of it? Where do you go on that?
I think
one thing that they also picked up on was that potentially, this was more to do, I picked this up yesterday, but more to do with the care home. They were saying that in the care home, for every visitor and each member of staff arriving every day, leaving every day, that they would be checked, so that there would be temperature checks. They may even be swabbed, and this would happen in perhaps lots of service industries. That they'll have that, like going to site at the moment. You know, you could be heat checked, fill in a questionnaire. That people are requiring rooms to carry that out. They're losing a bedroom, so that there's an area to carry this sort of thing out. That's another consideration going forward. Testing
areas and other spaces required.
Yeah, and in bigger buildings, does it become part of reception? You know, is everybody tested going in the building?
Like a holding area type thing.
In
essence,
I think the bigger landlords in London, they've got concierges will take that on, won't they? If that's the norm for a landlord like me in the regions and smaller units, individual tenants.
That must be similar though for landlords in, you know, Leeds, Manchester, Birmingham. You know, they've got there's large offices in those.
Oh, of course there is, yeah.
You know, just sort of thinking about like Centre Point and City Square and places like that. They must be able to support that with their reception spaces.
The landlord will, because their reception's in their service charge, isn't it? Sort of thing. That's an additional thing as a landlord that I'd be doing to reassure the tenants, right? And I wouldn't see it increasing the service charge too much in a bigger building. That's a no-brainer for me, like to ease the mental anguish of people coming back to work. But for maybe, it's dependent on revenue you're getting from your office investment, isn't it? For me, it'd be uneconomical to provide a person to do that and expect every tenant to pay the cost of it.
Yeah, that's great.
Where did you think, Gav, on the Cat A? Yeah,
I think a big one. Obviously, we've touched on the occupancy side of it's key, isn't it? Because that drives the design side, doesn't it? So if new guidance is going to start coming out about, I don't know, is it 1 per 10 anymore? You know, are we going to start reducing occupancies, or is it going to stay the same, but it's going to be more agile, rota-based, you know, systems? But I think from a ventilation perspective, I think like Alan touched on, you know, it'll be kind of negating any recirculation, you know, no recirc in terms of heat recovery. It could be full fresh air systems maybe, with a lot more filtration in there. I mean, pathogens in airborne pathogens can remain in the air for about up to 3 to 4 hours, you see. So I think there's going to be a new design emphasis on ventilation systems. You look at things like comfort conditioning, Alan, you know, just AC type cassettes, they're recirc, aren't they? They're recirc. So will that kind of move away?
If you had to take a top 3 insights to tell your clients or tenants or share with other landlords, what would they be at this moment in time, just to take forward?
From a landlord's point of view, my advice to landlords, or what I'd be implementing is to implement the health check on the existing services, realise what the usage of the building is going to be in the future from returning clients and tenants. So if that's a strategy report, a workplace strategy report, then so be it. So I'd get those 2 reports.
For the use of the audience, we haven't paid Alan for suggesting a workplace.
No. Well, any analysis, workplace strategy or their own tenants saying it, right, as regards occupancies and where they are in the building, and the data from them too, I'd look at the options of improving the existing services or adapting the existing services for the future, with a view for energy saving to fund any future work that could do. That's a short term in an existing building, and that's low cost measures, I think.
I think I'd split it into two really. So cost advice firstly on short term, as in implementing what we know already, as in use of communal spaces, toilets, tea point areas, spacing of workspace, desk spacing, so that we can use the space better, and encouraging people to come back to the office space. I think we've got to remember that GDP of this country is service-based. I think it's about 80% service-based. So we do depend on people working in offices massively in the city. So we've got to encourage them to come back. And obviously, transport is a bigger issue. But then there are longer-term issues of what does it look like in the long term? Probably more M&E based. Size-wise of offices that people are going to want smaller offices, and then determining what's the environmental controls that you need in those offices and what do people feel comfortable and safe in as well, because a lot of this is around mental health and well-being as well.
Thank you. And Gav?
I think I've been last with the difficult one, haven't I? John's got his bit. Alan's got his bit.
We've stolen your thunder.
There's nothing left.
I think ultimately, I think to wrap it up, from a developer and landlord perspective, I think ultimately, I'd say, surmising, think smart. I think you need to think smart, innovate and lead in terms of what you're thinking, and obviously, engage the services of an expert team who can look at these well-being audits and surveys, to give you that advice to put you in that leading edge versus your competitors to get people back to some form of normality, what they're comfortable with, I think.